Welcome to the Endgame, the show where I still can't come up with a decent intro. Yeah, I'll get there eventually, but first I'd like to talk about something concerning Skyforge. If you're not interested, then you can just skip to the timecode right up here. A lot of people criticize Skyforge for being pay to win, but I don't think that's quite right. It's more along the lines of pay to progress as fast as you want. By using the paying currency called Argent, you can purchase knowledge of enemies, among other things, which is used to increase your character's might. It's very expensive to get any real power, and you can earn Argent for free through operation missions and other things like that. On top of that, all the dungeons I've seen in the game scale you up to the minimum required might, so I'm not sure how I feel about it. On one hand, you're straight up buying power, which is pretty fucked. But on the other, you're not locked out of dungeons or content just because your power's too low, so it's not really hurting anyone, is it? But it really comes down to you and how you feel about it. If it's something that really bothers you, don't play the game. Anyway, I just wanted to make that clear so you don't waste your time with the game or this video for nothing. Skyforge was released in July of 2015 and was published by My.com, a publisher based in Amsterdam that's infamous for its blatantly pay-to-win filled games. It was developed by Russian developer Alad's team and US-based Obsidian Entertainment. You might know Alad's team from its only other game called Alad's Online. They're not too creative with their names, are they? The game was in development for 5 years and features a third-person action combat system with 14 classes that can be changed at any time to fit the situation. The game is instance-based, but features semi-open world maps called regions. The main draw of Skyforge is the combat, and there isn't actually anything to do outside of that, which normally would be a bigger issue, but honestly the combat in this game is fairly enjoyable and the large selection of classes means there's probably something for everybody. It's just a shame that you don't get access to all the classes from the very start and have to unlock them by playing through the story. I wasn't a huge fan of the first 3 classes. I thought they were a little bit boring, even though the first DPS class, the Cryo, is actually one of the strongest DPS classes in the game. But you can change classes at any time outside of combat. You could play a burst AoE class for the first part of the dungeon, use a single target DPS for boss fights, and then use a tank for the final boss. This gives you a huge amount of versatility in how you play, since each class has its own mechanics. For example, the Kinetic is an AoE class with DPS increasing and damage reduction force fields to help you survive longer and do more damage. The Monk, on the other hand, is a jack of all trades that has 3 different stances with different mechanics. Earth for defense, fire for damage, and wind for speed. You then have the Witch that applies stacks that can be used for highly damaging special abilities, and a Necro that summons minions and has a Lich form with insanely high health steal. The classes are easily the best part of Skyforge, and you max out each class by completing quests that unlock new abilities. These quests are always the same: kill 20 enemies. I think they could have put a little bit more work into the class missions if I'm being honest, but at least it's fairly quick and easy to max out a class. As you play through the story, you'll unlock things called bastions. By completing the missions in these bastions, you can unlock symbols, which, when equipped, give you certain boosts and bonuses. The first thing you'll unlock are these little triangles that drop on the ground and can be thrown at enemies to deal large chunks of damage. But later on, you'll also unlock a symbol that blocks any damage over 10% once every 70 seconds, and symbols that make your companion attack when you attack. When killing certain enemies, there's also a chance they'll drop weapons you can pick up and use. Early on, I highly suggest you use these weapons. They're super powerful, and they drop pretty frequently. One of the biggest annoyances is honestly the UI. It's big, it's bulky, and it's unintuitive. Not only do you have no control over your UI, but everything requires you to open up the UI menu. There are no windows for the inventory, the map, the world select, chat. Everything is in the same difficult to navigate, complicated menu that you will get lost in. I mean, you do get used to it over time, but that's not an excuse. The UI can be extremely hard to navigate for new users, and the complete lack of information makes it so much worse. The game has a basic tutorial that explains the general basics of the game, but that's really it. There's no help menu or guide, and everything is extremely ambiguous. It's like the game just expects you to be an expert from the very start and doesn't bother explaining or scratching beyond the very surface. And this isn't just coming from me. Multiple people in the guild I was in felt the same way. People who'd been playing this game for months. The game also has issues with customization. According to my guild, the game had a large update almost 2 months ago that removed most character stat customization in order to make the game more approachable to new players. Instead of levels, the game uses prestige to determine your power level. Prestige is determined by how high your might is, and how high your multipliers are. Every 10 point of might gives you a flat amount of each stat, and your gear simply increases your multiplier for said stat. You increase might by completing objectives such as bastions, converting knowledge of enemies, which drop from mobs, upgrading your cathedral, etc. Thing is, you have no control over how your character evolves aside from symbols. You increase your might and get gears with higher multipliers, and that's it. Every character is the same. There is absolutely no individuality to your stats, and it's a huge shame. Personally, that kills the game for me, and I have a hard time calling it an MMORPG when the game honestly has practically no RPG elements. The game is really just the combat. If the combat doesn't appeal to you, there probably isn't anything in this game for you. Honestly, the story is your usual. You are a divine immortal of great power, tasked with defending the world from monsters. Blah. Which is pretty disappointing, honestly. I mean, I wasn't expecting the next Star Wars or anything, but I was expecting something a little bit better than this from Obsidian Entertainment. I mean, they're the people that made Pillars of Eternity and Alpha Protocol. I'm used to these guys shitting out gold, but they must have ran out of gold flakes this time, because I can smell the eau de toilette if you catch my drift. Now, I know I'm shitting on the story a lot, but it's not bad. I mean, by Obsidian Entertainment standards, it's pretty bad, but by MMO standards, it's fine. It does the job. The story is told through province story missions. It's the usual instance dungeon mechanics you'd expect. Kill enemy till boss, kill boss, get reward. At first, this is all fine and dandy. These missions are pretty easy and you can just breeze through them like you're Marcus Phoenix in a Hive of Locust. But eventually, the difficulty does scale way up. Now for me, that was a problem due to time constraints, but I think for the average player, it's fine. You can still do the missions, but if you want to go back to easy mode, you'll have to grind a bit. Once the difficulty starts scaling up, you'll need to finish semi-open world maps called regions to get anywhere from 10 to 50,000 knowledge of enemies, which will give you a hell of a boost. Only downside is you only get those the first time you finish the region. They can also take you anywhere from an hour to 4 hours to complete depending on the region and how strong you are. You'll also have to do group dungeons with friends or guildmates to get better gear. These dungeons scale you up, so you don't have to worry about who you're doing it with. Everyone will have the same power, and everyone will get drops appropriate to their real might level. Personally, I joined the original Sins Guild, or Pantheon, as they're called in game. The group finder is pretty useless because nobody uses it, so you'll probably want to find a guild, and I recommend the original Sins Guild. No bias here, right? But that's all leveling really is. Farm materials to increase might and get better gear from dungeons to increase your modifier for better prestige. It's honestly one of the weakest parts of the game in my opinion. It's fun at first, but that doesn't really mean you want to do it over and over and over again. Oh, the PvP in this game is so much fun. I mean, if you don't like PvP to begin with, this is probably not the game that's going to change your mind, but otherwise, it's a lot of fun. classes also have different abilities in PvP to ensure matches are balanced. You have 10v10, 5v5, and 3v3 matches, and everyone is scaled to the same power. That being said, it's pretty difficult to get into a match since not many people actually play PvP. You'll probably have to queue with some friends and tell people in region chat or in your guild to queue for your match. Playing PvP is required for certain quests, and matches do give you gear, so you'll eventually find someone to play with. It's just a shame that more people don't play. Now 3v3 is a straight up round-based deathmatch in a small arena, whereas 5v5 is more of a tug-of-war kind of deal where you try to destroy the enemy's base. Honestly, if you want to play this just for PvP, don't bother. Not because the PvP isn't fun, it is, just because you'll be waiting 10 minutes for each match, if not more, and that's not really fun. Once you finish the main story, you get to unlock your god form. And oh my god, is it awesome. You can customize it and choose what color and form you want for your transformation, and transforming gives you a massive boost. I mean, look at him, I'm like Dr. Frickin' Manhattan from Watchmen. Not only does transforming turn you into fucking Zeus, but you can switch class whenever you want during combat, and each class has a god ability. When you get your god form, you also get followers that you can send out on missions. Sending them out makes them gather money and faith for you, among other things. Faith is what you use to actually transform into a god, and it costs you 75 faith to transform. It's probably going to take you a little while to actually get 75 faith though, so you can't really spam god form as much as you want. You can also use faith to earn divine deeds, which in turn you use to purchase upgrades from the god tower. Some of these are locked however, and you'll need to defeat avatars to unlock them. What are avatars, you ask? Well, avatars are insanely powerful bosses that you fight later on in the endgame. And by later on, I mean much later on. According to my guild, the avatars are some of the most difficult bosses in the game, and that's really all the endgame is. You do the same thing as before except with bigger numbers. A lot of people might say that the game doesn't start until endgame, since that's when you unlock avatars and raids and get to do all the harder dungeons with your guild. You'll be doing raids and farming dungeons to build up your gear from generation 1 through 6 and finishing up your regions, as well as doing some of the new maps like the season 1 through 3 stories. But there's no professions or anything to break up the monotony and constant grind. What you see is very much what you get. Although I think the combat is a lot of fun, most of the content was pretty boring to me. Not because it's necessarily bad, it just doesn't appeal to me. I felt like I was doing the same thing in different maps. And Bastion and Directive quests require you to redo older missions, which just made it worse. That being said, I definitely recommend it to anyone that likes these types of games and doesn't mind the lack of character customization or content variety. This game was made for people who love action combat games with insanely large numbers and damage. And if you ain't too good at math, don't worry, the game isn't either. Thank you for watching the endgame. You know, I kinda wanna make videos for Mondays and Fridays, but I'm not too sure what I wanna do for now. So if you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments section. I'll probably make an announcement in a week or two once I actually make the decision as to what I want to do. Also, we have a Discord now. The link will be in the description, so make sure to go ahead and join. Subscribe for new videos every Wednesday. I hope this was helpful to you, and happy leveling.